The Full Exposure Podcast is brought to you by Metro Health, University of Michigan Health, and Dr. Peter Hahn, in appreciation of the creative and artistic visionaries who enrich our lives through cultural connections.
Hey, everybody. How are you? What's up? Are you ready to go to the future? Because I'm ready to go to the future. The future sometimes is here with us now. This episode will also take you back to the future. Okay, I don't want to mix any crazy movie metaphors, but we talk about a time in 2006, 7, somewhere in there, where I saw the future with Jason Sosa, our guest today. And it blew my mind. And now it's technology that we all take for granted. We're annoyed by it. But at the time, I was like, I am seeing something that just blew my mind. And that was touchscreen technology. Early kind of Google Maps kind of craziness. Touchscreens dragging around, zooming in on his big old screen with Jason Sosa in a bank vault in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I'm going to do a terrible job of setting up this episode because these are complicated subjects, but our guest, Jason Sosa, is an amazing communicator. He's got an amazing story. He makes complicated things easy for, slugs like me to understand. That's why I needed to have him on and talk about the future and talk about artificial intelligence, talk about tacos, talk about the fact that he had a 0.8 something GPA in high school, but now he's one of the most sought after people to discuss and work in the artificial intelligence communities, workplaces around the country. He's just a great dude. I didn't know him well. I don't know Jason well, except that I'd done two photo shoots with him all way back 11, 12 years ago. And it's been interesting to follow him. TEDx speaker, alumni of that, I think 2 or 3 times he's talked at TEDx around the country. And you're going to love this episode because you're going to go to the future right now. And we're going to look back at this episode in 10 years and go, oh yeah, NFTs? Sure. Yeah. No problem. I just paid for everything with Bitcoin or some other blockchain thing. And it's going to be commonplace. But right now in this episode, you might have your mind blown like mine was in 2007, 6, 8, whenever I first met Jason. Anyway, let's dive in, okay? Let's just get into the future with artificial intelligence expert, entrepreneur, chief technology at Futuri, a cloud-based software company. And my new friend and the guy who I'm going to just rely on and explain everything that's going to happen to us in the next decade and become commonplace. Let's explore the bigger picture with my buddy, Jason Sosa.
So you were saying that you had a plethora of investors in one of your companies, some from the Midwest, some from coastal areas. And Midwest was a little more high maintenance in terms of their mindset, or what?
Well, if you look at the West Coast, their thinking is scope and scale. So look at Facebook, Twitter, or any of these companies. They're thinking, how can I accumulate as many users as possible and monetize later?
Yeah.
And that's a mindset, I think, in the Midwest that is unheard of, right? So they're looking at unit economics. I mean, they're thinking of parts. I have a machine, I stamp, boom, 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 boom.
We're Rust Belt, baby.
It's a manufacturing mindset. So their whole way and orientation of investing is based on that kind of thinking.
Sure.
And that's a cultural, difference from the East or West Coast.
Huh. Interesting. Well, I would imagine, it's there's also that startup fail fast, like that sort of mindset. I think we're a little more want bumpers on our investments. You don't want to throw any gutter balls, and I think it's changing. Obviously we've become more entrepreneurial and have some venture capital here, but I think For the most, I mean, we're miles behind Silicon Valley or like Wall Street or something like
Well,
that.
with COVID, it's flattened the playing field. I mean, everywhere is where you need to be, so we can hop on the Zoom
Also,
call.
dig into that a little bit. Just
Yeah.
because everybody's working remotely and we all have access to each other, like just through the web, and you can Zoom, you can do whatever, and you can exchange ideas without being in the same room, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. So, it used to be that you had to be embedded into a community, and of course that still helps, right? But with COVID, that really did change a lot of things, and people have left the inner cities. They're moving to more rural areas for all kinds of reasons. But I think that's really changed the nature of investing, of starting a company, because you don't necessarily have to have offices and chairs and desks and all the capital stuff that you'd have to deal with normally.
I've often thought, what's going to happen to commercial retail? I think it's too early to tell, but it's like if you had if you had 30,000 square feet downtown Grand Rapids or Chicago or anywhere, it didn't matter, and no one came in for a year and you're still okay. You might transform what your next office space is going to look like. It's not going to be 20,000 square feet anymore.
No, a lot of people like to work from home.
Yeah.
I mean, I find it in some ways I'm a lot more productive and effective. But if you are an extroverted person and you enjoy chatting to somebody at the water cooler or at the vending machine or whatever, I mean, that's probably going to be a little more difficult. But for those people that are, it's probably a discipline issue, getting up every day and being focused on what you do, which is why it's important to love what you do.
Yeah, it's funny how, like, if you're sitting in your pajamas and maybe haven't showered in 2 days, like, it's still so easy to get sidetracked, and it has nothing to do with whether you bathe or not. But like at home, it has its own distractions,
Oh yeah, especially if you have kids that are like knocking on your door, trying to be on a phone call, and the microwaves going and beeping, and and it's really humanized colleagues, because in the past, we had this professional facade we put in, and hello, Mr. Jones, and you wear your tie, and but now you see kids running in, and pets and dogs, and so it's changed some things.
Yeah, the culture's definitely changed. Like it started with Casual Fridays.
Yes.
Biz casual, and it was like that was a big deal. You didn't have to like wear khakis to work that day. You could wear jeans.
Yeah.
And then it went to the tip jar that was like, oh, if you bring a $5 for this charity, you can wear jeans on Friday. And now that just seems like another planet ago in culture.
When I first got started, I went to a Chamber of Commerce event, and I had a tie, and it's like a breakfast, and I dip my tie in this maple syrup, and I'm like trying to be all cool about it. Now I'm lucky if I wear like a hoodie and flip flops. It's just it does seem like the standards have changed, and I think it's for the better. I mean, we should be looking at people in a different way, but it is kind of based on the bubble you're from.
Yeah, we all put on veneers, but to have like a particular prescriptive wardrobe seems kind of silly when you can just like dress however you think you should be dressed versus how they think you should be dressed. And it's just such a small thing to get stuck on that, there's still remnants of that in certain places. But, well, hey, Jason Sosa, that was great pre-roll. I mean, what did we cover? Oh, wait, we got to go back to tacos.
We do.
So it's got to be corn.
It has to be authentic.
Yeah.
Corn tacos, limes and salsa, and that's it.
What about cilantro and onion?
Oh, yeah, that's a prerequisite.
Okay.
Absolutely. And no sour cream.
Come on.
None of this.
My wife is not going to like to hear that.
No. None of that stuff. That's Taco Bell stuff.
Well, that's the supreme. It's supreme. You're telling me it's not supreme, the taco or burrito supreme?
Grande supreme, yeah.
I mean, come on. All right, okay, I'm with you. My wife.
It's the difference of like pineapple on pizza. Some people are into it, some people aren't. I don't judge.
Well, there's nothing authentic about sour cream on a taco, is what you're saying.
There's nothing authentic about sour cream on a taco.
Okay, great. Well, my wife Kathy is she's gonna have to change.
Well,
based on this podcast. Not that she's listening.
I would just say if you haven't tried an authentic taco, then you don't know what you're missing.
Yeah. Well, cool. Okay, so let's reset. I want to set a scene where I remember meeting you. I remember having a photo shoot. Now, I can't remember the timing, whether it was before or after this Active Site Art Prize thing, which would have been year one of Art Prize. Do you have a memory if we did two photo shoots?
I think it would have been 2007.
Okay.
Yeah, we did two.
Okay, so then there was, but the one that blew my mind away, Jason, was you had some temporary space on Wealthy Street. Wealthy was just coming alive. Wealthy Street, that whole corridor was, just starting to turn. And I went to this building, and you were in this bank vault, this old bank vault. There was no money in it.
No, just an empty black room, and that was the only requirement I needed, just a dark room.
And I was doing a photo shoot, and you were my assignment, and we met, and in there you were showing me, again, 2007 was a different time, touchscreen technology. And you were showing me maps, like early versions of like what could have been Google Maps with all this data, and you were telling me that you could like click on something and it might be a corner restaurant, and you could you were telling me about the future, Jason. And it's here 10 times over, and it's stuff that we take for granted.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
And I remember you demonstrating this map and dragging stuff around, and my mind blew up. Like, I didn't understand it. It's like we're going to talk about NFTs, non-fungible tokens, later, but like I was in that space. It's like, are you telling me we're going to watch movies on our phone, like at broadcast television? How can we watch broadcast television on a tablet that's not connected to anything?
I mean, I think at that time, we were just happy to have fast internet. I mean,
yeah, dial-up. So what was that company, those early innovations you were working on, that you were one of the first people thinking about touchscreen technology? So what was the baseline? Take me back to that entrepreneurial startup that you had.
At that time, I had an e-commerce business, and I was selling camera cases on eBay and other places. That whole business kind of was another story, but it started by happenstance, and it was pretty much on autopilot. So I had a lot of free time on my hands, surfing the web, looking at Gizmodo, and got to connect with a few different founders that were working on this technology. A lot of it was open source, so it was OpenCV, open frameworks.
Yeah.
And there was some laser technology, and I kind of simplified it to the extent I don't need to understand the physics behind how this works.
Right.
I just need to understand what are the pieces of the puzzle I need to pull together. So it's basically just a cardboard box with a white paper on top of it, like in a picture frame, with a camera inside. And then I would drag my fingers, and the software would track the X and Y position of my fingers. So, it kind of took that a little bit further and said, well, what if I put a projector on it? And then then things start snowballing. So in early 2007, I'm running around with the 2x4s on top of my Jeep. I'm going to every major company in West Michigan that I can think of, just to try to, there's something here.
Right.
There is some value here of something. Yeah. How do we commercialize it? How do you do something with it? And I didn't have any experience in tech. I had no network of any people that I knew or any major accomplishments yet at that point. So I was kind of a risk, I think, for a lot of people. So I really appreciated Hayworth bringing me in, and I got to work out of their R&D facility for ActiveSite, and we built a 8-foot multi-touch wall.
Yeah.
So it was really cool.
Now those are standard, those smart working boards, you need to have that. Another thing you mentioned, Hayworth, and I know that Brad Reuter, who went on to, he was at Hayworth, you met him there, but then he went to Universal Mind, which was a client of mine forever, and I always felt like I knew what was coming next because I was doing case studies of what they were doing with software and things. And I remember seeing this table when we did video of it. It was all iPads. It was like basically an air hockey table, and it had all these connected iPads on it.
Yeah.
And you could flip a note across different platforms. And it's like you're going to sit in a meeting, in a conference room, you'd be taking notes, and you just toss it over to your neighbor, and then they can write on it and then send it over. And it was like, what are you talking about? Crazy. But anyway, point was, Hayworth gave you a break at that particular time to do some things. And then what eventually happened to this technology, and how were you what was your mindset and talent in terms of growing and thinking about what touchscreen could do, and where did it kind of end up with that company where you eventually exited out?
Yeah, the magic of it wasn't so much in the touchscreen itself or any of my technical talents. It was more my ability just to hustle and stay persistent when it was hard.
Yeah.
So I ended up taking it to a bunch of people and really had a lot of difficulty getting traction in West Michigan. There just wasn't the risk tolerance to, hey, let's drop everything and start a company.
Right.
2007 yet was not a major entrepreneurial thing to do. It wasn't cool, I guess, to start.
At least in tech.
At least in tech, right?
Yeah.
And so I ended up reaching out to people in Boulder, Colorado, and they welcomed me with open arms, and I dropped everything here, flew there, and moved in 2 weeks. Got accepted into the TechStar program, and then the product changed a lot because it wasn't so much about the touchscreens; it became more about the face detection, the face recognition side. So the capital cost to invest in this touchscreen technology was too expensive. So the web cameras are abundant; they're everywhere, and they're $20.
Yeah.
So we just made a web camera that could be a sensor. It could detect age, gender, emotions, attention time, and we worked with companies like Reebok and Walmart and PepsiCo, and started placing them all over the country.
So what was the early need for face recognition? We all have that on our phones now, but like what in those days, again, late 9, 10, early 2011, is that kind of the time frame you're talking about?
Yeah, it was 2011, 12. There wasn't a lot of the off-the-shelf tools that exist today. So this wasn't for security. This was for analytics. So think of Google Analytics in the real world. It was a camera that could tell you how many people are looking at this grocery store end cap. Or if you're looking at a TV screen, how many people are there? Is it a man? Is it a woman? And then it would change the ads dynamically based on who's looking.
Oh, wow.
So it was akin to like a Minority Report.
No kidding.
Kind of ad
Well,
space.
that opens up a whole can of worms, because then how do you teach, and we'll talk about AI later, is how do you teach, okay, well, we have a white 52-year-old dude looking at this end cap, so let's feed him more Cheetos and Dorito ads or something like that. I mean, you could like speak into a lot of like stereotypes, misconceptions, racial stereotyping. Like I'm sure it was fraught with that, or that temptation, I suppose. How did you think about that at that time?
Well, it's funny because the tech is only so good, but when I would show it to people, they would anthropomorphize this technology. So they had this feeling that there's this computer that can read their minds, or it could know more about them. So they would get excited if it said they were a young adult versus an adult, things like that. It would, the technology has come a long way, but it was mostly used just for aggregate statistics. So it was totally anonymous information.
Sure.
And the more attention you feed it, so if you're that man looking at that ad for Cheetos and you give it a lot of attention, it'll learn that it's appropriate to serve that ad to that demographic.
Okay, yeah. It just layer on top.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're a woman walking by, you see a totally different ad, and if you're a young person versus old, that was the general idea.
Huh. And then did that that technology made it into stores and just kind of like, wow.
Yeah, we got into this pilot phase, but we also entered into a stage where it was called the Series A crunch at that time. So there was more seed companies than there were venture capital dollars to fund them all. And so one of our larger competitors had gotten a pretty good investment from Kleiner Perkins, and they weren't able to get their product market fit. So it made a real big challenge for us to raise the next round. So the company ended up getting sold, and I sold that. I actually built an offshore office in Singapore. Most of our developers were there. We got some funding from the Singapore government, and and then the company sold in 2015.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is it like one of those stereotypical success stories where, you built something up and you were able to exit out, and now you have a lot of freedom to decide your next move? Did it give you some time? I'm not asking if you're rich. I'm just saying, there's these modalities of stories, things I don't understand about capital investment, venture capital, where, you do a round and you have $100 million all of a sudden, right? Well, it's not really a loan, but it's not really an investment. I'm sorry, this is so basic, but it's like, you have people, and then their jobs essentially seems like they're losing all this money, and because they're investing in all this stuff and hoping it lands. Can you just help for me and for all of us to just kind of say, okay, baseline, here's why round one and so round two, and how the capital gets spent. But at the end of the day, the founder's still, when you exit out, they're still getting chunks of money, you know what I mean? Yeah,
and that happens. I mean, you have situations where you have a really good exit and you own a big chunk of equity, and then you get your payout. That certainly happens. Not with every startup. A lot of startups, fail, and that's just the reality of things.
Yeah.
You run out of capital or things like that, and then you also have these instances where you do end up selling your company, but you don't end up rich. So those are like an acqui-hire kind of scenarios. You just want to make sure that the IP goes on, that the investors are able to
build on top of.
Yeah, exactly. So it's It is a kind of a mixed bag, depending on. But it's the ones you hear about in the news. Those are the ones that are the huge success. You don't hear about the guy who, lost it all. But the thing is, you train your brain for 4 or 5 years to do the same thing and to build a product. I don't care if it was a major success or not. I mean, that definitely takes a toll on you because you build an identity around who you are and what you do, and then I think it's a little bit of getting used to. I think the first year or two, I was kind of like just walking through the grocery store, like, what do I do with myself? Because I had all this, I had my 10 meetings a day or more.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you don't.
And you're in this, in space, kind of floating.
Exactly.
Like there's no more stimulation coming. That's kind of how the pandemic felt to me. It was like I felt numb for a while, and then I started to feel things again. And it was because I wasn't running around and doing, things that I look back now and go, is this really worth my time? Now I'm trying to value my time more, or what I really want to do, because I didn't have to do those things during pandemic, things I thought I had to do. So it's helped me recalibrate. But my point is, so you were in this, figuring out your next move. You had sold a company, and you're like, okay, what's next?
Yeah, I was fortunate to connect with a Techstar colleague, and who's opening a venture fund, and so I got to be on the other side of the table. So I was vetting deals and got to meet with and mentor entrepreneurs that were starting their businesses. So that was really cool. I got to spend some time doing that, and then I got to work on being a management consultant. So I got to see lots of different types of products. Worked on VR headsets, 3D body scanning, wearable technology. I worked on so many different projects and saw so many different types of teams that I got to see patterns emerge, and really focusing on a go-to-market strategy, fundraising, and product. So that was my main focus, and I learned so much from that, and continue to do a lot of that today.
Talk about the impression of Silicon Valley and startups and venture companies and all of that is there's a tolerance for failure in that world, and there's a lot of people that have lost people a lot of money, but it was like something just quite click. And maybe if you did that in West Michigan in the 70s or 80s, you'd been blackballed from the community. It was like, but in this other world, you can have 2, 3, or 4 major, terrible failures, but you're still held in quite high esteem enough that you might hit a home run and get partners around an idea. Is that your perception and experience to some degree?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you can't burn people and burn bridges.
Right. I mean, it's more how you handle those failures.
Yeah.
And oftentimes founders that have gone through a startup or two, you're battle tested. So it's actually a safer bet, I think, for investors that are going after second, third time founders, because you're not having to learn on the fly like you did when you were 25 years old or something like that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, yeah, you learn by, the greatest lessons are when you really screw up.
It's an expensive education. I had a $3.5 million education on that.
Did you really?
Oh, yeah. So it's funny, too, because as a founder, on paper, you're a millionaire, but in reality, it's a totally different story. So, things can change really fast, and it's a fast-moving thing to be in, but I can't imagine doing anything to grow faster as an individual than to be an entrepreneur.
All right. So you mentioned education. Can you tell me what your GPA was in high school?
My GPA was 0.98.
0.98.
Yep.
You had less than a 1.
Yeah.
And then you took that to college, right? Like, I know.
No. I didn't go to college. I went to hustle school. My dad was an entrepreneur, and my dad never learned to read or write. And so he would buy properties, he would start businesses, and he would put me in situations where I would have to do those kinds of things. Huh. So, and I never understood maybe it was just my learning modality. I'm very auditory in how I process and retain information. So I had a hard time just sitting still and like looking at something, and there was no purpose to the mission. It was like, figure these things out. I think Elon Musk describes it as why teach somebody the mechanics of a wrench when you can teach them the application by showing them this is how you use a wrench to solve a problem. So I did miss that in school, but I loved to learn. And so after leaving school and then working in a factory as a welder for a number of years, I realized this is not where I'm going to be. Yeah. I need to break out of this. So I started studying and learning and using every creative method possible to accelerate myself and to get upward mobility. Networking with people, using LinkedIn, all the tools that were coming on at the time. Those were big.
But how did you navigate 9th through 12th grade, butting against and being perceived in many ways by your peers and by faculty and whatever as a failure or someone who's really struggling?
Oh, yeah. I was told I'd be a ditch digger and, all these other things. My best hope was to work in HVAC or some kind of trade school.
Right.
And so I think it's important for people to know that, just because you don't necessarily fit the mold, right, of this cultural conditioning of you go to school, you get good grades, and you go get your job, and then there's still this mindset of you're going to get a pension or something.
Yeah.
And I think our generation is largely, and younger generations are realizing that's just a load of shit. It doesn't happen that way.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's an empty promise, and it even happened to my dad, who's, he worked diligently for the company, for United Airlines, and just, he retired and saw maybe 3 or 4 years of his full pension retirement, and then the company, they declared bankruptcy, got the legacy costs, and what they thought would be a particular income in retirement, which would have been fantastic. It wasn't what they had planned on. Now, unfortunately, they had done, they were diligent in saving and doing some other things, so it wasn't a disaster. But for most people, the idea of just being a company man and buying your cottage on the lake and a fishing boat and living out your days, that promise is gone. Yeah, it's totally gone. So the even going through that path, you still have to hustle. I mean, I think that's what we talked about earlier, and I think if you're going to apply that hustle, you can either pick it to make someone else rich or to do something on your own. And for me, it wasn't so much about being rich; it was about how can I add to who I am as a human being and grow and expand myself. So that was my outcome. And then so
the
what
money's
makes you what kind of was the special sauce that you were able to kind of develop where you could get traction that wasn't in academia, but you're like, I have value, I think I have great intuition in this particular way of thinking. Like what was that for you?
So I went the opposite approach. Rather than going into a deep specialty, which everyone said you need to have a niche, you need to have your specialty, I went the other direction. I became a generalist, and I embraced that. I skate on top of the tapestry of all of these different topics, and I look for patterns that connect them together. So out of that, I can see new opportunities emerge from one segment to another, and really, from that, I found opportunity to buy and sell something, or to start a service, a web service, which I had on radio, and I sold that. So, and also just the value of collecting good people. When you meet people and making sure you maintain those relationships. These are all the things that I learned over the years that were more valuable, I think, to me than memorizing a particular fact or a math problem or something.
I'm a firm believer in video and photography production. If you surround yourself with really talented people, they all make you look better and smarter and a better outcome.
Absolutely.
I try to hire the best people I can afford to hire to help me to do stuff. And then when you hook on like Mark here, we've been working together and he's doing his own thing too, but 6-7 years now, and that's great to have a shorthand, but it applies to life. It just doesn't apply to whatever. But if you're building any company of any organization or enterprise, get the best talent you have. So that's a whole nother side of it. I had one other thought I want to get to before I forget it, is that in this side of you kind of being a generalist and thinking about how people might respond to technology, you're on the finance side, putting together deals, or venture side, you're on a management side of some things, and sometimes you're very much on the forefront. I mean, these are all different career pockets in 3 to 4 year little pockets that you've sort of changed?
Yeah, you have to learn a language. So you have to learn how to speak finance, you learn to speak code, you learn to speak legal. And then the more you add those capabilities to yourself, it really expands your social worth in a lot of ways. There is this social currency, and people, when they meet you, they want to know, what have you done before? And so I was really focusing on that narrative of so what have you done before? You say that 1,000 times a day. So you tell your story. But then you also have to have a degree of confidence in just how articulate you can be in describing things. And then that makes people feel comfortable. And it's sales. It's really just a sales aspect. The harder part was overcoming, I think, the limiting beliefs that are just encoded in our head.
Yeah.
Of what you need to do to be successful.
Right.
So, and then the way of the
And
polymath.
that is coding. We were coded to believe
Oh,
a
yeah.
particular path. There was a map. You had to take that road, and the destination was a certain income, certain health care, and some security. And that's all encoded now.
Oh yeah. The illusion of security is broken down, and now there's this. There's an allure of variety.
Right.
So all of all the things you desire are outside your comfort zone, and so being able to push yourself beyond your terror barrier, your fears, to get to those things will expand who you are as a person.
That's really an interesting concept to understand, that what allures you is usually outside your comfort zone.
Yes.
So that's why entrepreneurs are like, oh, what's next? Or I learned this, or how do I develop? Like, I'm still grinding at photography. I want to get better at photography. It's like I've been doing it forever, but I still have a desire to learn something I haven't learned. And I'm not saying that I'm, successful in that way, but what I'm saying is I'm just taking this idea of there's always another rung of the ladder that we're just wired that way. Do you think? Is it just like, otherwise how boring that would be to like exit and scale out and then you have nothing left to do.
Well, it's this myth of I need to retire someday,
Right.
so that I can sit at home and drink beer and watch TV. I mean, I don't know what else. I don't ever want to stop working because I'm not really working. It's work is play.
Yeah.
So I really enjoy what I do, and I think that's an important ingredient because you need this emotional fuel to carry you. Mm-hmm. And so often people are fighting that emotional fuel because they go to the drudgery of sitting in a cubicle farm and typing on a computer all day and they hate it, but they don't do anything about it. And so then you die inside very slowly. So you're either growing or you're dying. And I think that if you pick a path of following the allure of novelty and variety, there's a lot out there. And your next deal or opportunity is as close as the next person that you meet.
I'm a huge believer in that. Like, you always talk about, I listen to a lot of podcasts, but like there's so many stories of like, if I hadn't gone to this thing or this conference or walked into this restaurant and then walked up to somebody's table and actually, like, my life would have been different. Like it would have, if I had turned left down this hallway instead of going right and I bumped into somebody who then struck up a conversation and 3 years later we're working together on something. It's like those random things, but it's just consistently putting yourself out there. And I think like my impression of your story is that you've had to also kind of keep reinventing is not the right word, but there were points along the way to me that it seemed like you had to reintroduce who you are in the moment of like trying to also figure out what you're doing and who you are next. Does that make any sense as a question?
Yeah, absolutely. You keep as you start this path, right, of going into the unknown, you run across your own fears. Imagine like the metaphor of going into the woods at dark. You don't know what's out there. You hear the noise of the wolves and the coyotes and whatnot, and you're kind of freaked out. And you don't have a lot of certainty or something to grab onto. And so that internal battle is the most meaningful and most difficult to overcome. But once you get comfortable in that space, you can venture anywhere. And you build additional references in yourself of what you're capable of and what you can achieve. And so the freedom that you get from doing something like that is well worth the sacrifice of perceived security.
Yeah. Well, and it can all be, we've just seen it, like, what you think is a secure industry all of a sudden isn't, like whatever it might be. And there's examples in the pandemic. There's other examples where companies don't pivot to technology fast enough. But I have a question in your purview from like 2005 to today. What has surprised you in some way that you thought technology would transform humanity that maybe you didn't quite see coming? And then maybe what is something that you saw coming and it was just like, it just took time to get here, but that here we are?
Probably the culture wars. That's probably one of the bigger surprises, I think, and just the bifurcation of the rich and the poor and the exacerbation of inequality. And all of these things are not necessarily technical or technology, but they're accelerated by the technology movement.
Sure. Because of that lack of capital to access those things and scaling across parts of the world where they don't have access?
No, it's more the AI that runs these social networks that reinforce your confirmation bias.
Oh, sure.
What you want to see, you see more of.
Yeah.
And so you believe that's your bubble, and then every opinion outside of that is stupid, right?
But those algorithms are fueling rage, and once they see all this activity with rage, it gives you more of those things to give you enraged by. So it's like there's a loop to it that comes up. So, but that's kind of is that AI, or is that both driven by greed and influence in terms of returns on needing clicks and thus ad revenue, and thus, I mean, how intertwined is AI with is just reflecting like a mirror what we're learning and seeing, because AI has almost become able to understand humanity and our mindset and how it works, the bad parts of it, or what we're easily triggered by? Or is it the result of this confluence of, I don't know, is there an evil person behind the curtain, so to speak, that is just benefiting from this? Or is this more of like, we have to understand ourselves as individuals better as we interact with technology?
Yeah. I mean, I don't necessarily think there's a bad person sitting behind somewhere, but I do think that the intention of these algorithms are there to drive a specific result, and you're a human being. We haven't really changed much in 250,000 years. We're still these anxious apes in a lot of ways, and we're pointing a supercomputer at our brains every time we log into these things. And this is really a part of the Social Dilemma documentary that came out, and that stuff it's real. I mean, this technology is far beyond our ability to comprehend. For most people, they don't know how Facebook makes money. Right. They don't realize that they are the product, and their attention is being sold. Right. And so that was to the degree that it almost toppled democracy would have not been something I would have considered back. I remember sitting with an early engineer of Facebook in 2007. We're in Palo Alto having a drink, and he was telling me there's this company, Facebook, and it's going to change the world. They have all this information and all these people. And he was telling me, just watch out. Here it comes. And he was spot on. So, I mean, I think that was probably one of the bigger surprises for me.
Wow. So what was a no-brainer to you working with this is it the idea of being able to move and have companies like Amazon where everything's getting so fast and so on demand, which is right in our wheelhouse of like, now we're accustomed to being frustrated after just seconds or minutes. You know what I mean? Like, it reminds me of that one Louis C.K. bit where he's on an airplane and there was Wi-Fi, and it was like when Wi-Fi in airplanes became a thing, and he thought the premise of the bit is just basically he was enjoying, like, I'm in a plane, I'm in a chair in the sky, and I have Wi-Fi, I'm surfing the internet. And then it went out like 5 minutes later, and he was like, slams his laptop down. He's like, this sucks. Like that so quickly became like the, our baseline. We used to become so accustomed. But what was the kind of the no-brainer or the thing that just seemed undeniable when you look back 10 to 15 years ago and where we are today in 2021?
In the old days, you would go to a payphone if you had to stop and you were a salesman or something, and you had to call your secretary and get your messages. So there's a gap between when you need information to when you receive it. Mm-hmm. So that gap has been shortening every single year on year. So now the only main limitation is really just human biology. How many thoughts can you process at a single time? I'm really excited to see some of the things going on with Neuralink and Elon Musk and what he's working on. We're approaching a time.
What is Neuralink?
So if you're not familiar with Neuralink, it's actually literally drilling a hole in your head and putting a sensor in your brain.
Okay, yeah, that's some real that's some real sci-fi stuff.
It's transhuman stuff, yeah. So we're probably, I would say, a decade away from seeing probably more widespread adoption of this type of technology. It'll begin with more specific use cases around disabilities.
Right.
But then over time, this will mature. And if you had, would you put a chip in your brain if you knew that you could augment your capabilities or send a message at the speed of thought?
Probably. I mean,
If everyone else was doing it?
yeah. I wouldn't be the first, 5% to do it, but but you've thought a lot about wearables and this type of technology, and I think you gave a TED Talk probably 5-6 years ago, TEDx Grand Rapids.
Yeah.
And I watched that in preparation, and you were talking a lot about wearables and like Fitbits or whatever. It wasn't even, it might have been pre-Apple Watch even, or right about Apple Watch time. But like, you were talking about wearables. It's like they're going to be in your clothes. They're going to be but that idea of then taking something internalized inside your body, and I think you were even talking about like lens, like Google glasses or what were those called? Were those Google
Yeah,
Glass?
the Google Glass.
Yeah. So, and then I remember putting on a prototype of that in Detroit. I was at some Google get to know Google Glass, and there was people. You'd talk to the glasses, and then you could like use eye movement to like open different menus. But it was still too clunky. It was like the earliest or whatever. It was like a rotary phone of that type of stuff. But I want to get back to your knowledge of wearables, where this transforms, where now eventually we're talking about actually embedding this technology within our brains or in our bodies or on our eyes or wherever it might be.
Yeah, the augmented reality space has yet to fully open up. We're going to create a layer of reality on top of this physical world. And it will gamify things, it will unify things, it will, in many ways, complicate the world. But I think Apple's working on some technology around those. There's some expectation that they'll release it in the next year or two. It may or may not be glasses. I don't know it might be a contact lens. I mean, I don't really know the vehicle and how it's going to be, distributed. But there's no question that computer vision is accelerated to the point where we can map an entire room and everything that's in it and pull it into a virtual space. So if we could put on a VR headset, we would see this table as like a glowing table of lava or whatever.
Sure.
And actually feel it.
Right.
But the appearance of it would be different. So reality itself is going to begin to distort with deepfake technology and face tuning and all the things that are possible.
What do you know about physics and quantum physics and these things? Like, has that been an area? Because it's almost like this. I've always been fascinated with the ideas. I have beloved friends and family in Madrid, Spain, and they're living in this alternative universe. I can call, and now I can FaceTime, which is revolutionary. Like, I can talk to you.
That's Jetsons level stuff. Right?
It totally is. It's amazing. But it's so accepted now. And I remember running up phone bills in high school of $1980s, $6-7 of like, I would call Spain and talk for 20 minutes, and that call would cost me like $68, which was like probably all the money I made that week, working I was working like front desk at a health club, handing out towels with lockers, or here's your locker key. But in terms of quantum fit, like this idea of a virtual world skinned on top of our physical world.
Yeah, like simulation theory, the idea that this may not be the base layer of reality. So if you look at where Pong evolved to where it is now, where we have virtual reality, I mean, that's just in the course of half my lifetime.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine that over the course of millennia, perhaps that we're not the original a layer of reality that's here. I mean, it's kind of bizarre to think about, but when you start going into it, a lot of it does kind of make sense.
Well, it does. And I remember my dad was always kind of an early adapter of some technology. I mean, we had a Commodore 64, and I remember playing you would just shoot like asteroids. It was maybe called Asteroid. I don't remember. But it was like you had to use just the arrow keys to fly a jet or a spaceship, and then Atari came out, and now look at that. Now it's fully immersive, social platforms built on top of gaming. Like, that whole world exists. And I don't have young boys. I have girls, and they spend, mine are 21, 19, and 15, and they spend a lot of their world in a space and in a world communicating but they're here with me in a room. Like there's this whole other digital world happening all the time. But what does that mean does anything about that give you pause or excitement or both about like this virtualized, the VR sort of trend?
I see a little bit further beyond, I think, the novelty of it. My main concern is that we end up in this kind of dystopian world where everything is measured. The interaction you have with a coworker, were you more dominant or less dominant? How long were you there? Did you stand 6 feet apart? Or whatever the requirement might be. And especially with working from home, do we do screen captures now? Are we key logging people? Mm-hmm. To what degree of invasion of privacy are we going to allow?
Yeah.
And as we become more dependent on these augmented brains that we've
did you see that Black Mirror episode that's famous about everyone's giving each other ratings with their interactions, and it destroys people's lives, and some people got canceled, and then they had immediate it's
happening today in China. I mean, that's the social credit score, and there's nothing to say it won't happen here. So the more dependence we have
some dependence on that. I mean, we have that with rate your driver, and they rate the passengers. There's those interactions, but taken much further.
Right. I mean, to the extent of, can you get this apartment? Can you travel? Can you get a flight? Can you do basic freedoms that you enjoy today, but without a social credit score that's high enough? You need to do some community service to remedy that. That's basically what is happening in some parts of the world.
Really, that's on the ground. That's
happening today.
Thinking about
Yeah, happening today.
And so what's stopping that from coming here, especially when people can make a buck at that kind of vetting system?
Americans, culturally, we are, I think, more libertarian in our views against those kinds of things. So it's probably cultural.
Yeah.
Unless there's an immediate need where that could, like a 9/11 event that shifts people's mindset and something like that. But if you take it a little bit further, let's go out a little bit more than 5 years. Because I can see in 5 years we have augmented reality and we can explore these worlds and how cool it is. You and I can shoot virtual blasters at each other in a garage or something. That's cool. But you take it out a little further. Now you have sensors in everything that you do. You're monitored. If you have an employer, they can. Your score goes down if you smoke a cigarette or you eat the wrong kind of salami sandwich or something for your health score. So I mean, there's just a lot of things that are
this eating thing scoring really worries me. That's
they put sour cream in their tacos, and then you're like, no, you get a 0. That's not acceptable here.
But yeah, I mean that's these are challenges. Many of them are this moral thing, which also exacerbates the divide that you talked about, because some people don't see things as issues, like moral issues, especially when you're talking about technology, and that old proverbial slippery slopes are everywhere around that, and the way that technology can move now so quickly, where it becomes so commonplace in a matter of months or days, or even the speed at which apps, everyone was, what's the voice app? Oh, I forget it.
Oh, Siri?
No, it's a social platform.
Oh, Clubhouse.
Yeah. And now everybody's they had 9 million subscribers in a month, and now they're down to 2 million. Everyone's like, oh, it sucks because it didn't deliver on a promise.
It's an interesting feature. I think I heard that there was the Slack CEO was on a Clubhouse with the Clubhouse CEO and said, we're just going to take this feature. I mean, why not? Right. So it's a little hard to build a business around a feature. So who knows? Who knows how that'll turn out?
Well, my point is how quickly things are vetted out, and that now it's happening with Ethereum and Bitcoin, and there's so many high stakes put on what's made in the next decisions that are made in the next month, 2 or a week or a few days. Where did you jump in on GameStop? All this stuff that happens is pretty remarkable. But I brought up Bitcoin and Ethereum, so let's talk. I want to make sure that I'm just not picking your brain. So we're going to get to actual things that you definitely want to talk about in this conversation in terms of what you're doing and where things are going. But I have a hard time understanding NFTs, non-fungible tokens, which is attached to the blockchain. I mean, I think last month I've tried to learn about something specific more than I have in my life, at least in the last 10 years, in terms of technology and how it might impact me. So NFTs, and where do you think this is going to go in terms of the benefits of having a a trackable token that can be attached to this virtual world?
Yeah, it's important to understand that most of the infrastructure that powers our economy and our world is built on tech from the 1970s. I mean, it's old, outdated, antiquated technology, especially in the financial side. It's because it's reliable, it's robust, and don't change it. And in so doing, this decentralized movement has really changed so much. So you could see, and someday you get your car title as an NFT, and then your wallet pops in a picture of a Subaru or something. Mm-hmm. So that there's a lot of power in that. This certificate of authentication is basically what it is. But because it's powered through the blockchain and with smart contracts, you can have stipulations on those things. So if you're a creator, you can get royalties on content that you produce that is purchased. But with anything, I think with NFTs, it's only as valuable as the underlying asset. So if you have a Banksy, you have an NFT of a Banksy, that's going to be more valuable than making a funny GIF on your computer and just posting something. So there's a fad with it right now, but I think there's still going to be how do you commercialize this and how do you make it actually solve a real problem that's practical? I think that's we're going to see in the next couple of years with NFTs.
What sort of landmines do you see around the energy consumption of mining coins and creating the blockchain itself to track the stuff and creating the value? It seems to that's a gray area for me. I know that it takes enormous energy and carbon consumption, electricity to generate this thing that's you can never touch, see. I mean, you can see it if you're on a digital platform, but is that something? I mean, is it helping to pivot to greener energy? Is that going to drive any sort of like innovations to help be more efficient in how these things are mined?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's where we'll see a lot of innovation because there is a financial incentive to ensure that we can reconcile some of the transactions that are happening on the blockchain. So I don't think it's a matter of that it's really it is carbon inefficient, but it's more the status of our energy grid and where we get our power from. So it really could move toward a cleaner energy source. I think there's a few different initiatives underway to power clean mining operations in Bitcoin.
Okay. So I picked your brain enough around like just, hey, here's somebody who's spent their life thinking about how technology impacts people, humanity. So what are you excited about working on now professionally? And what's really exciting you when you think about the near term in the next 18 to 24 months, which in some respects is forever, but for most people that's just a blink.
Yeah. In the tech world, everything is a blink, but so much happens in such a short time. I'm a little concerned of hyperinflation, just kind of given the state of the economy. And so I am pretty bullish on Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. The 200% year-over-year returns, it's a better gold than gold. I'm a Michael Saylor convert, so I think that there's a lot of things as far as economics that are worrying about where we go. This K-shaped recovery, where the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and then there's a further divide in it from the digital point of view of the sophistication of what they can do with these tools. So if you don't know tech, you're going to be left behind, and it's sad because we have an education system that still teaches kids like it's the 1990s. Yeah, like it's how we grew up, right? It's going to be the same thing for our kids, and that's just not the case. So I think those are some of the things that concern me. Where I see technology headed that I'm really excited about, I really love the disintermediation of some of these large institutions, which goes back to the Bitcoin conversation. So that's one aspect of it. It's empowering individuals that know how to use these tools, that can use them effectively to have more freedom. Yeah. So those are some of the things I'm really excited about. Of course, augmented reality plays into that, and VR, and those things are really sexy. But on a day-to-day, what can provide value to me mostly, it comes down to economics.
Yeah. So you think that you're saying that Bitcoin's going to go to $1 million probably in 10 years?
Yeah, I think in 5.
5.
Yeah.
Accelerated out. Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
But I meant also this other part of that question is like you physically working professionally right now on, what are you doing day to day? You've done a plethora of things in the last 15, 16 years that are all exciting and innovative in venture capital, technology, developing things, management side, writing deals, all this stuff. So what are you doing today professionally, and what are you excited about in terms of that?
I'm really fortunate. I get to be a bit of a dreamer as my role. I'm the CTO at Futuri Media, so I get to have my head in the clouds and think of strategy and find better ways to grow the company.
So you're back to being a generalist.
Back to being a generalist, yeah. And then part of that, too, I'm an advisor for a few companies. And so I like to have some variety. I have a core focus of things I focus on, but it's also nice to be able to give back. And so I really enjoy mentoring, and I really enjoy the entrepreneurial spirit of doing something.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the risk-taking aspect is something that it's just in your blood, I think, if you do this enough and do it long enough.
I keep going back to your father because I keep thinking about him not being able to read or write, but was an entrepreneur and a hustler, and you not having a very low GPA, not set up on paper for any type of success that you're doing now. So what do you attribute that sort of observing your father, not undoubtedly struggle, but still be successful in his own way? Like, have you uncracked and thought about that? Like, how does that make Jason Sosa as persistent or tenacious or whatever it requires for you to do what you do without a college? You didn't go to college.
Nope.
You barely graduated high school.
I didn't graduate high school.
You didn't? Thank
No.
goodness. Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
No, I ended up getting my GED, though, so.
Okay,
But
well,
that kind of fixes it.
I'm going to put down a score. I'm going to say
I get a little
you
tick mark on
a
that.
little tick mark that you actually have a GED. Well, but you also, so how have you navigated this world between, it's also kind of a blue chip, chippy, very kind of cliquey world. And pedigree means a lot if you went to Harvard or Stanford or MIT or wherever you went as a pedigree, and you have zero pedigree. So how are you able to move in these same rooms? And I'm saying you should be able to, but I'm saying that had to be a barrier. It has to be thrown back in your face at times, I'm sure.
Well, I think it was more just a self-imposed limitation. So you have this imposter syndrome that you struggle with, and I don't have the degree, I don't have the credentials, I don't have a whatever. But eventually you just get past some of those things, and you're like, the vision of where I'm going is more compelling than the constraints that hold me back. Mm-hmm. I remember going in to seeing my dad. He couldn't read or write, but he's fixing machines, he's fixing lawnmowers or whatever the case he's fixing. And I go, how do you know to do these things? He says, well, they weren't made by gods. And so I took that mentality of they weren't made by gods, but I applied it to AI. I applied it to the challenging aspect of these new technologies that for some are just so intimidating they don't even want to begin the journey. Yeah. So I tried to break it down in the simplest way possible, learn some of the terms and the way they describe these things, and ended up going to Stanford and to MIT and talking to people. And after I talked to them for a little while, I realized, I'm just as smart as these folks.
Sure.
They're just more privileged, and so. It just kind of comes down to how badly do I want it, and what am I willing to sacrifice in order to make it possible. So that was.
Well, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. You still have to want. So yeah, if you can be privileged and go to Stanford or Harvard or MIT or wherever, just wherever you think the world needs to be, at Oxford or wherever, and it doesn't matter what discipline or field. You still have to want something at the end of the day to pursue, and that gets us back to this ambition and desire that's always a little bit out of your grasp. But it seems to me, which I'm just marveling at, Jason, is just that you've had this meandering, wonderful career in something that most people said you had no business stepping a toe in.
Yeah. In most businesses, in most industries, I had no previous experience. Mm-hmm. So I qualified myself. And I think that was probably the most important decision that I had to make from a very early age, which was I'm not going to allow the limitations of society or my environment dictate to me my future. And that's something that I'm very happy I did every single day.
Yeah, but that's hard in practice, especially like, if you're feeling beleaguered, how many times have you wanted to give up? Like, I'm sure there's points of extreme frustration. Like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, what is happening?
Yeah, this is never going to happen for me. I'm just being an idiot. I'm wasting my time flying all over the country. I remember being in Palo Alto, sitting down, meeting with an investor in my very early days, and he was so angry with me. He left the meeting. He just got up and just wanted to storm out, but he sat down and asked me all these angry questions. But I actually emailed him back afterwards and thanked him for that, because these difficult experiences, as hard as they are, they help you grow. And many people shy away from things that are uncomfortable. But if you kind of get used to the hard, you get used to the struggle, and you pick your hard, you grow faster. So it's kind of the same thing when you pick up a video game and you put the setting on hard, you get better than if you put it on easy. So
right.
that's just a thing.
It's the same with flying a drone. You put it on sport mode, you're going to crash probably a little bit more than if you're on super safe program mode.
Yeah, being safe isn't actually that safe. I mean, you don't tiptoe your way through life hoping to get to safely to death. So it's you want to live full out, right?
Well, yeah, it's hard. It's just like anything else. It's hard to apply that. I think we have the human. My cycle is you can get very passionate about things, especially as a creative and as an entrepreneur too. I think it's easy to not get excited about things and not really do then the hard work of actually completing something, or actually taking something and actually deploying it to market, or to take something that you haven't done or seems hard and find a way to do it if you can project value of going through that battle. And that seems pretty universal to me, whether you want to be a doctor, an attorney, or own a gas station. Like it doesn't.
Yeah, there's this overemphasis on these external factors, right? You have to have the right pitch deck. You need to be able to do finance. You have to be able to do whatever, or sales. But the lessons that are not often taught is just really how you deal with the internal struggle of your own self-doubt, of the imposter syndrome, of the fear of failure, or when you do fail, how do you deal with that? The identity part of it. So those are things that I think I'm really grateful for going through. I went through, instead of going to college, I went to an Anthony Robbins fire walking thing, and that was my college. I walked on fire, but what it was this idea that I have. It wasn't like magic or anything mystical. It was just that I can overcome a limiting belief, something I didn't think I could previously do. Now I can do.
Yeah.
And then you build these references, So that education of going through that was more valuable for me, I think, than college, because it gave me the power of understanding questions, of understanding limiting beliefs, of my own internal psychology, which is something that I use every single day.
Well, I think if there's anything in common between you and Anthony Robbins, is just that you're great communicators. I think you're a good salesperson. I don't mean that in any demeaning way, but you have to be able to communicate ideas, and you have to convince people of your passion and your understanding. Like you have to convince people that you have an understanding and it's something that they quite don't grasp, or they see value in you pulling them in a certain direction. Mm-hmm. Do you remember how much that weekend or that week cost you at Anthony Robbins?
I put every single penny I had on 4 credit cards. Like I went through every single card. I split it up. I'm like, okay, this is like a $10,000 course. Was it $20,000? Okay, put 4 on this one, 3 on this one. It's like, damn it, this is a lot of money. And I thought I was making a stupid decision, but in retrospect, it was the best decision I ever made, because it gave me the tool set that I needed to navigate this world.
That's amazing. That is truly incredible, because it's almost like you could have perceived that, or maybe it could have been for some people almost a slot machine thing, like a last resort. You're down to you're borrowing your last nickel to go to a seminar, and hoping it pays off by Anthony Robbins.
Kind of like college debt, right?
Yeah, well, touche, for sure. I mean, that's great. But, what was the belief? I'm just fascinated with Anthony Robbins too, and I love that documentary that came out that also was pretty unvarnished and addressed kind of. It was interesting to see behind the curtain in terms of that, but just like what you must have been ingesting all kinds of things by him, and then where do you see that sort of mindset of these coach mentor types that are in this space? Because I also think he's also he's also selling so many.
Yeah,
He's selling
yeah.
dreams and the conversion of that. So anyway, I don't want to speak into it.
Coming
but I
from
just-
West Michigan, I mean, I actually got started by doing a Quick Star thing. If you remember the old days of Quick Star, it was this another form of Amway, and they gave me a book called The Cash
It
Flow.
was on the web, dude. You didn't have to go to people's garage. Well, you still had to go to a garage to pick stuff up.
Yeah,
right?
but it was like an early Amazon. It's kind of what they were trying to build, and as a multi-level thing. But they gave me this book by Robert Kiyosaki called Cash Flow Quadrant, and I read it, and it broke down the model of of being a employee or a self-employed business owner or investor. And it gave me a new frame of reference to how to view the world. And because my previous conditioning was you go to school, get a good job, and that's your life. So now that wasn't necessarily the only path available, I needed some tools to equip me with that. And I found Anthony Robbins quite by accident trying to find a file on Napster, and how they get mislabeled. And
Sure.
you find somebody, I was like, I like this dude.
You found like one of his cassettes.
Yeah, one of his cassettes at a garage sale. I think I found some more there too. And then it helped me unlearn, because you have this cultural conditioning of what is acceptable and how you should behave by your parents and your church or your whatever environment.
Right.
And then so to break beyond that, everyone looks at you and says, "You're absolutely insane. What are you doing? Don't you realize you're going to destroy your life? Don't you know that you need to have a backup plan?" And I'm like, my ambition, I think today, is now to live in a van by the river. That's actually a life goal. It used to be my greatest fear. So, there really isn't anything bad that can happen to you if you just push yourself and, go beyond the comfort zone of familiarity.
Have you been able to? I'll get off Anthony Robbins in a minute, but I'm sure you spent time, in this group with him, walked on fire, and had this, incredible week or weekend, whatever it was. And then have you had subsequent either contact or other types of seminars where you're like, that was successful for me, and now is that a resource, that sort of modality of learning in a high-intensity environment? Is that something you've wanted to repeat after the kind of that aha experience?
I wish they would bring that to schools, because they make it about a cognitive experience. It's like you're getting spoonfuls of information just shoved in your mouth, and that's supposed to somehow make you a smart person and productive member of society. But what they're really ignoring is the gut-level nervous system of education that's in your body.
Yeah.
So like right now, I have no clue what I'm going to say to you until it comes out of my mouth.
Right.
I haven't rehearsed or thought about this or planned it. And that's ultimately like how you get in this state of flow. And that's how the best stuff comes out of you, because you're not trying to control it. Fire isn't controllable. So if you can figure out how to help kids tap into that power of the emotional fuel. So emotions are often things that we poo-poo and we look down upon, like, whatever, it's just all emotional, kumbaya shit.
Yeah.
But in the end of the day, there is something that gets you up early and makes you stay up late. And if you can tap into that power and figure out where it comes from, and you can harness that in the way of discipline with your skill set, you can accomplish amazing things you didn't even think was possible.
Yeah. It's amazing, too. I was listening to, and this is, I sort of feel this way talking to you because it's out of my purview, but I'm sort of fascinated with Sam Harris and I just listened to a podcast that blew my mind about free will and choice and the illusion of free will and all that. And he's like, he's trying to explain how that isn't a thing. But it's amazing. But what clicked for me was just this idea of, it's like nothing really bad can happen to you necessarily. Like, you can have bad circumstances for a while. But like the honest, authentic, and all these, I hate the word, that those are played out words, but these sort of like well thought out, intentional, brave moves, generally, if they're done without malice to anyone and in the spirit of self-improvement or growth or business growth or family growth, whatever it might be, it rarely could ever come out horribly to the point where you've destroyed your life, like some people might have fed you saying, "What are you doing going to this weekend thing?"
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you have to go beyond what you think your limitations are. Otherwise, you're just going to get more of the same. I mean, that's the options that we have.
All right. Final thoughts. We've been going at this for a minute, but is there anything that you want to make sure that we cover that we haven't? We've just been all over. I love this conversation, but I'm not the best host to take Jason Sosa and like show your expertise and knowledge across the sectors that you've had impact in throughout your career. So I apologize for that, but it's just like this is fascinating to me. So what?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I would share one thing is that I've accomplished a lot of really amazing things and interesting things in my career and things that I've done. But if you're somebody just starting out, and I had every reason not to succeed. I had kids. I was a job as a welder. I was making minimum wage. I had a bad GPA. I had no college degree. So I think that I hope to be a example for others that are saying, I can't do it. This can't be for me. That's for people in Silicon Valley. That's for people elsewhere that have connections. If you want it bad enough, and if there's a fire in you, you can find a way, and it's possible. You can get there, but it won't be overnight. It'll take a long time. And it has to be worth the sacrifice.
Well, I agree 100%, and I've lived that truth as someone who is not completed his education in college and higher ed, and I'm fortunate, like you have, to have found something that I'm passionate about, and I can't think of doing anything else. The fact of like the idea of working on a salary or going to the same office or working remotely it's not even in my vocabulary anymore, like of how I think about the world. But
it'd be like a betrayal to your soul, I think, to sit down and do like spreadsheets all day or something.
Yeah, and there's been times economically where I was like, well, maybe I should go get this job, or maybe I should go do this internally for some other big company and just be safe. These were conversations I've had in the last few years, as my industry's changed due to technology, the democratization of technology in terms of who can make a good photo. Our phones take great, it used to be, in the film days, you needed a professional. No one could expose film properly. And that's the world I started in analog photography 25 years ago. So the idea now that most of the market is gone in terms of still photography, and I was lucky to pivot to video and motion, and then now we're in this world where things are being consumed. But the amount of people that can do this also baseline levels out what people will spend for it. So there's not a premium often in this world, and I wish it were different. But that's the good and the bad of this interconnectedness and this access that we have to technology. Other parts that I don't like are also transforming the world. We have news events of look at the trial in Minneapolis. Like right now we have evidence because somebody had a decent thing in their hand that they just record video. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I'm 100% inspired by you because I also, I think it's amazing that you have this story. I also wear it as a chip on my shoulder that I don't have some MFA in photography or film studies.
That's less you have to unlearn.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah, we could go on forever about, academia and that world and how insular that is, and actually how disconnected it is from the day you leave with a diploma.
Totally disconnected from reality.
Totally, yeah. Well, thank you for this. I'm sure we're going to talk again. Hopefully, I want to touch base in a year or two and just see, timestamp this and see where we'll probably all be wearing VR headsets.
Nice time capsule.
Yeah, it will be. Just like the photo shoot was in the bank vault. That was a moment in time that just went crazy, blew my mind. I couldn't hardly imagine the world. I knew it was coming. I didn't know how. And now it's so commonplace. It's unreal. And you were in this dark bank vault playing with touchscreen technology and overlaying. It's just amazing. What a cool thing, man. Thanks for popping in and coming. I know you came in from Holland, so thanks for getting the GR in my studio.
Yeah. Thanks for having me in.
All right, man. Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, okay. I just admit right now this was one of my favorite episodes of Full Exposure because of two reasons. One is it's going to be so interesting to look back at this conversation in a year and a half, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. And we're going to look back at this and go, these guys were talking about the combustion engine, basically, of the internet at the time, talking about NFTs, talking about blockchain, talking about AR and VR, when we're all going to be sitting in a Jetsons augmented reality world. And who knows if even podcasting in this platform is going to exist in this way in 5 years, in 10 years. Who knows? But anyway, Jason Sosa, my thanks to you, buddy. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for blowing my mind again, and making everything that you do to make these complicated, hard to understand concepts of technology easy for trolls like me. And it's just great. So I'm just so inspired by your story, from nearly a high school dropout to the upper echelons of artificial intelligence technology and thinking about the future. You are the man. Thank you, Jason. Check out the episode page at fullexposurepodcast.com. Video excerpts are up of Jason and our portrait shoot. And these little snippets of the conversation we've had in video format are a lot of fun to look at. Little appetizers to the full meal, so to speak. Just make sure you don't put sour cream on those tacos if you're having tacos tonight. All right? Hey, everybody, let's go have a great week. Let's go get it, all right? Take care.
The Full Exposure Podcast is brought to you by Metro Health, University of Michigan Health, and Dr. Peter Hahn, in appreciation of the creative and artistic visionaries who enrich our lives through cultural connections.